Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. My name is Mike and here we are in Mike's Garage. Today's topic of discussion is the E30 No Start, and we're going to be covering all the basics on a crank no start, no spark, no fuel, and we're going to be figuring out how to troubleshoot what the issue is.
Before we get started, one thing I definitely would like to talk about is that if you haven't picked up one of these manuals for your cars, you can see I have the Bentley version. Highly suggest picking one up. And now, they make it for pretty much virtually any car that's out there. I highly recommend it. They literally talk about everything, and I mean everything. And it goes way more in depth in each little chapter, as you would call them. And it's really helpful. You'd be surprised the amount of stuff you can find in here. Highly recommend hopping on some forums too. I mean, believe me, there's tons and tons of people who have had all the issues with these cars under the sun, and they will have no problem helping out. So definitely don't be afraid to hop on a forum and ask some questions. It definitely doesn't hurt to ask questions. I mean, the only thing you gain from it is just knowledge. How awesome is that? Now, before we get started, I would just like to quickly touch up on my motor, just to get you guys accustomed to it. I mean, it is a little different than stock, and I will explain what is done to it. I fully built the motor myself, and the car itself is an 86 325E, so it does have the ETA block, which was the 2.7 liter engine, and the 325i was actually a 2.5 liter engine. So I have the stock ETA block paired up with an 885 head, or simpler terms, a 325i head with a 325i intake manifold. And the reasoning why I went with the 885 head swap and the intake manifold is because on this head, the intake and exhaust ports are much bigger. So for comparison, the stock 325e motor, don't quote me on this exactly, but revs to somewhere like 4,000 RPMs or like 4,250, just low. So the car is fun to drive in its stock configuration, but hopefully with the help of this, it'll be a little more fun, just a little bit. Anyways, I have a Schrick 282 or 284 -272 cam. I'll figure that out. I just can't remember off the top of my head, and I'll put it somewhere on the screen what it actually is. So I have a mild cam with some heavy-duty rocker arms and heavy-duty valve springs. There's actually 2 springs per valve. Super cool. Can't wait for this thing to be, really tuned in and running. So far, I've just had it idling. But regardless of that, it's all going to be hooked up the same. The only key differences on this E30 versus a 325i is the location of the crank position sensor. So you might not be able to see it here, but down below where the crankshaft pulley is, there's a trigger wheel on the 325i, and that is where the crankshaft position sensor goes. On the E motors, it actually goes inside of the bell housing, and there's 2 of them. One is the crank position sensor, and the second is a crankshaft speed reference sensor. And that, I believe, just measures the teeth of the flywheel on the rotation. And the crank position sensor on the 325e is read off of these pins that are on there. And I actually have an aftermarket JB Racing flywheel, lightweight flywheel, but I have my original one, and I can show you the pins I was talking about. Might be kind of funky to see, but right here by my finger is one of those pins I was talking about. And so here we have a sensor. The sensor sits inside the bell housing, and every time it passes this little peg here, that is when it will give a signal to this, send it to the computer, so on and so forth. It also doesn't take much for one of these to be damaged. This is a brand new sensor, and if you can see right here on the end of it, there's a little dent, and so basically it's junk now. If it would focus, we could get a better view on it, but there we have it.
So the reason we talk about the crankshaft position sensor is that is a very key component for any car to work, not necessarily just an E30, but whatever car has them. If it is not in 100% perfect working order, your car will not start. And what the crankshaft position sensor does is it sends a signal to the computer, and if you're not getting that signal, you will not get spark. And there's a few other things that we're going to go over that'll cause you to have no spark, but that is one major thing that would definitely not allow you to have spark. The next thing I would like to talk about is fuel. And it's pretty simple. Any car needs three basic things. Don't get me wrong, there's more things that applied to this will cause it not to start. But there's three major things an engine needs to start, and that's compression, spark, and fuel. Quick and easy, dirty way to check your compression is just to get a compression tester kit. You can rent them at your local auto parts store, or you can even run to Harbor Freight like I have, and I got a quick compression tester kit for I think around $25 or $30, and they're pretty handy and pretty simple to use. And it's pretty handy to have that book, like I said, because instead of hopping online or whatever, don't get me wrong, I'm sure you could find it, but you can just flip to the book and you can see around what PSI you need to be at for a good to great compression reading.
I know it's super tough to see, but right where my finger is, where these two bolts are, you follow this cable down, it goes on to the oil pan, and what this cable is a grounding strap, and your car will actually crank, but you will not get it to start. And you definitely need to make sure you have this ground properly grounded. You want to make sure the cable and the sheathing on it has no cracks. I know they get hard and they do tend to crack after a long time, especially on these vehicles, you know, because they are older. This is an 86, so this is definitely something to look out for. Make sure it's cleaned. And I actually want to talk about something that was the culprit to my vehicle cranking over and not starting. I was super eager and excited that I finished my build, and I forgot to hook up the grounding strap. And I had realized it later on, and I hooked it up, and I wasn't getting spark. So at first I thought it was the sensors, but they were both brand new. So that's when I got my multimeter out, and I came to the coil. Now this is definitely a two-person job because you will need someone to turn the car over, so it's pretty straightforward. You just want to get your multimeter and set it to 20 volts because this should be reading 12 volts. And so what I did was hooked it up, had my brother in the car starting it, and I was only getting around 8 volts. So I knew from that moment that I wasn't getting the power needed. So I traced it back. In my model, I actually have the battery in the trunk, and I'll show you what happened. So this little guy in my hand was actually the culprit for my vehicle not getting a spark. And I haven't seen this in a YouTube video or talked about on forums really, but what this is, it's called a fusible link. And you could think of it like a circuit breaker. So if this gets overloaded, this will pop per se, but you won't be getting that 12 volts at the coil like you need when you crank. So this was on the positive battery terminal. You can see my makeshift one now, but this was on my positive battery terminal, and there's 2 wires that run with it. Here they are. I cut this out, and it was hard to find at first because this is all heat shrinked and wrapped up nice and neat. So this is just a temporary setup I have now. I will be redoing it, but basically I just spliced in a 50 amp fusible link from AutoZone. I just put 2 little connectors on it and stuffed them in there, and it works. The car fired right up the first time, and I was super happy. So that's one thing to look out for. You know, if everything else checks out, if you're getting fuel, if you're not getting spark but you're cranking, compression's good, it could be a power thing, and it could be the coil. oftentimes it could just be something silly like this. So make sure your ground strap is hooked up, everything is properly grounded, because it was a pain to figure this out. So a quick and dirty way of checking if you have fuel. One is to just turn the car to auxiliary and you should hear the fuel pump kick on. But if you can't, for whatever reason, you can always crack the fuel line. I don't suggest doing it from up here by the fuel rail. You can, it's easily doable. All you have to do is just, loosen the clamp and get like a little cup or something to catch the fuel, because this is definitely not an area you want a fuel leak at. I personally recommend doing it underneath the car where this meets the hard line. You can just crack it open and put a little pail. But if you got a buddy with you, you can just get a little plastic container, take this off, have it spit into the container, and they can just breathe on the key real quick and you'll get a squirt of fuel. And that's how you'll know you'll have fuel. But like I said, if you're not getting fuel, check your relays, check your pumps. There's one in the tank and there's one outside, right in front of the passenger side rear wheel. There is a secondary little fuel pump up there by the fuel filter. Also, here in my hand we have the 3 main relays for this, and I believe it's the middle one is actually for the fuel pump. So if your fuel pump, you don't hear it priming, it could be a relay, and sometimes they get hung up, especially if the car was sitting. So you can literally have it set, just take a screwdriver and just tap on them, free them up. Sometimes that'll do it, or sometimes it could just be that bad in condition. Another thing to look out for is these C101 connectors. And these are pretty straightforward. You just unscrew these, if I can with one hand, probably not. But you just unscrew this, and sometimes if they're sitting, the pins in here can actually corrode. So just make sure everything is clean and everything is getting a good contact with each other. It would not hurt to put some dielectric grease in there just to keep everything protected. Like I said, make sure that's clean and you should be okay. So here we are at the side of the head, and another easy way, let's say you are getting the right power to the coil, you are getting 12 volts and you still have no spark. Well, one way to check for it, you can buy an inline spark tester. This is pretty self-explanatory. You actually just take the lead off of the plug, and you have to find one for BMWs, because these Bosch spark plugs I have, the ends actually have to thread off in order for the boot to fit on it. So this unfortunately does not fit. But basically the way this works is it goes inside of here, this end goes onto the spark plug, and obviously this lights up. So if you have spark, this will light up. And let's say you don't have one of these, it's not the end of the world. All you have to do is just take your spark plug and you'll hold it against your intake manifold, and that will ground it out. And then you have a buddy crank it and you should be able to see spark. And if you're not at that point, I would highly recommend to make sure that you have your coil plugged into the right spot on the distributor. So the coil on the outside is the second one in. Make sure your timing is set right. Make sure everything is wired correctly in its right spot. And definitely when you're all done, don't forget to put everything back. Because when you're trying to figure stuff out and troubleshoot, it's very easy to lose track. Just simple stuff can make or break it. Like my ground strap, for example. If I had that hooked up, I probably wouldn't have blown that fusible link, and I would have been good from the start.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope this helped, and I am going to throw some clips I have from my phone in here. So if you do see the change in quality, I hope you guys don't mind. But I do have some clips of showing the crank position sensors, specifically where they're located on a 325E, and the fuel line where the hard line meets the soft line, and just a few other clips that I will be throwing in here. But please leave a comment if this helps out, or if you have questions, questions about the build, or just want to say hello. Do as you please. Stay tuned for the future. I think in the next episode we're going to be tackling some rust repair and a little bit of body work. I have a lot left to do. As you can see, my rear subframe's sitting on the floor because I'm waiting for axles. So, yeah, a lot of work ahead of us. That's not good. A lot of work ahead of us. It's definitely going to be awesome when it's done, and it's really cool to be able to share this experience with others, and maybe give someone information that, you know, they might not have found. Like that fusible link. Couldn't find that anywhere. But thanks, guys. Please leave a comment if you enjoyed this and if it helped, and see you on the next one.